All right, welcome back to the Roast It Yourself podcast brought to you by Coffee Bean Corral and Current Crop Roasting Shop. I'm Stephen Burnett with Coffee Bean Corral in Jackson, Mississippi. And with me, as always, is Catherine Mansell, certified Q grader, director of Current Crop Roasting Shop, and avid snowshoe wearer and heavy coat engulfed person right now, Catherine Mansell. So how's it going down there, Catherine? Tell me about it.
Well, New Orleans hasn't seen this much snow since sometime in the 1800s, I think.
Wow.
It's quite bizarre. I really haven't seen this much snow since, I was like 2019, and I was way up in Maine.
Wow.
So, at first we thought, oh, it'll snow for, just a little bit of time, and then it'll pass away and everything will melt. And it snowed for hours upon hours. When we woke up, and looked outside, it had been snowing at least for a few hours and snowed for a good 7 or 8 more hours.
Wow.
But you can't keep this city down. People were skiing down Bourbon Street,
Yes.
snowboarding at the parks, moving out and about. I hunkered down though.
Yeah,
I
I was gonna say, how did the dogs like the snow?
So Lulu, who you know from a past podcast
Yes.
episode,
A former guest. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
she was not enthused at first. Really not enthused about it. I put her sweater on, which normally makes her really happy, but she hated it. The other two loved it and were running around in the snow like it was the happiest day. So,
I love
uh,
it. I love it. So you had to take the advice from our previous episode about roasting in cold weather because it's not happening. Um, well, each week we set aside about 10 minutes to field questions from home coffee roasters and professionals alike about roasting, tasting, and most importantly, enjoying coffee. You can send your coffee questions to questions@riypod.com. That's questions@riypod.com to get a nice shout out from us and to get your question answered in an upcoming episode. This week's question is from Keith G, who writes, "Hello, Catherine and Stephen. Hope this new year finds you well and healthy." Thanks, Keith. I love your podcast. I've learned so much about roasting and enjoying coffee. I make it a point to listen to each episode when my dog and I take a walk together. Dude, you are after our own hearts on this. Like dogs, coffee roasting, it doesn't get any better than that. Sorry, back to the. I have been roasting about 6 months on a Fresh Roast 800 with extension tube. Having watched your roast along for the Fresh Roast 800 was a game changer. Glad to hear that. I used to drink pour over coffee, burr grinding for each cup. However, after visiting Greece and Turkey this summer, I decided espresso was for me and brought a machine using the same beans. It was good, but now much better because of roasting. I still drink coffee as well as espresso. That means that pour over coffee as well as espresso, but lean towards espresso. A friend turned me on to roasting, and here I am and loving it. My question is, with espresso, is it normal not to taste the same notes, the same things, the same flavors as when brewing coffee with those beans in like a pour-over method? I don't see huge variances in the espresso shots when I'm using numerous varietals of beans that I have roasted. They all taste good. Well, most of them. I appreciate the honesty there. I've pulled some terrible shots. Oh my gosh. I do see more differences when using these roasted beans for brewed coffee, like with the pour over again. Honestly, even with coffee, I don't seem to taste all the notes that the people say they taste, like fruity, blueberries, nutty, floral, yada, yada, yada. Some are good and some are not as good. Hope this makes sense. It does. And thanks. Keep it going, Keith G. Well, Keith, man, thank you very much. Very thorough question. Yeah, and we've got basically, to me, two strains of it. One is tasting coffees as espresso, and the other was, what about tasting coffees in general? Do we want to tackle these in reverse order?
yeah.
Okay. So why, and I'll put this question to you, Catherine, because you are a bit of the expert on this one. What about all these notes people are tasting in their coffee, the fruity, the floral, the blueberry, all that stuff? Tell me about that.
So when you are first trying to taste anything in coffee other than coffee, it can be a little bit difficult because, when you drink a cup of coffee from, most of your life, you think, oh, I like this or I don't like this. Really, all your brain is saying is coffee. So when you start getting in there and reading the tasting notes, Um, you really should be thinking of the tasting notes most of the time as a nice hint, or I can pick up this small piece of a blueberry. Now, some coffees you will taste blueberry or blueberry muffin. Come on, Ethiopia. But not all coffees you're going to be able to taste that intense sort of flavor in the coffee. So, what I did to try to help my palate acknowledge those notes in the cup, I started eating those fruits. I would introduce blackberries to my diet, and the next week I would eat just black or blueberries and then papaya, all of these other things. The more that you taste these sorts of fruits, vegetables, chocolates, spices, nuts, the more you taste those and introduce them to your palate, the easier it is for you to pick those notes up in coffee. If you've never eaten a pomegranate before, you will not taste pomegranate in coffee. Now, that sounds like a very reasonable idea, but from experience in my intro to cupping classes, sometimes that fact needs to be said. When you are looking at cupping notes, a lot of these cupping notes are truly coming from me cupping the coffee. A different sort of brew method. Essentially. And most of them are from true medium roast coffees. Different roast levels will highlight different notes in the coffee. And then each brew method is going to introduce something a little bit different. So I think the closest way to be able to taste the notes in the coffee for a brew method is either a pour over or a drip. Truly, a drip can give you pretty accurate representation of what you would find in cupping notes. I'm not so sure about what you would be able to pick up specifically with cupping notes from an espresso shot.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, so I was going to say the way I think about this, espresso shot is concentrated. Obviously, that's what you're doing. It's a very concentrated coffee extraction method, and basically, if you're trying to pick out, if you look at it like anything else, like if you're trying to find something, like a tasting note, for example, if you've got a whole big pile of concentrated things all in a small space, it's really hard to find what you're looking for. You want to, if you're looking for something specific, you want to spread that out. Like if you got a big, like you're like me and you don't fold all your laundry, you just wash it, dry it, and it's in the basket. When it's in the big basket all piled, my wife would hate this, in the big basket all piled up, I can't find that sock I need. I've got to spread it all out, scatter it out, look through everything, and then I can find exactly what I'm looking for. And with espresso, it's more like that big basket of laundry. It's more like all those flavors are right there all next to each other, and it's very intense and very punchy. And if you want to like actually taste all the notes individually, you're going to have to spread that stuff out, give it time, do something like a cupping, do something like a pour over. And the benefit, I think, to the cupping method, which doesn't use a filter at all. If you've never cupped coffee or seen it, just Google coffee cupping. Don't Google that. Google coffee cupping, and you'll see. I mean, they have special spoons and cups, and it's very trying to eliminate as much variation and as much the filter flavor, anything like that, out of the process, so you can taste exactly everything you need. And they don't just take one sip and go and judge it off of that. They take, and I'm not telling Catherine anything she doesn't know, it tastes just a bunch of over and over again. You're tasting the same cups of coffee as they cool to catch absolutely everything. And what are you doing? You're spreading it out, so you give your palate and you give your senses time and opportunity to see and experience all that coffee has to offer. So definitely you can taste notes in espresso, but it's much more like a really intense thing than it is a very delicate and very specific way of brewing coffee. So I think your experience Keith is right on the money. So as far as like things he could do to improve his palate, when you talk about tasting, different things that we're looking for, I think that's super helpful. And the other thing too, I mean, there's different methods. I don't know how much of this is science fiction or whatever, but like even when you have coffee in your mouth, inhale through your nose and activate your olfactory sense, and you get a little bit more taste out of it. And there's all kinds of things like that, little tricks of the trade. And maybe we can do an episode where we talk more about that at some point. But yeah, anything? Yeah.
I'm going to throw in one more thing. comparative tasting is really fantastic because if you're just tasting one thing, it's a little bit harder. But if you have two coffees put up right next to each other and you taste them side by side, you'll actually be able to pick up differences, which are a little bit easier at first. And then you keep going and just compare what you're picking up. And then from there, you can try to get a little bit more specific as you go. So comparative cupping is actually a really good way to help bring out the notes. Seems like a little bit more work, but when you have two that are completely different next to each other, it actually makes it quite a bit easier.
Well, that's usually when you have more work, you get a better result. You get what you're looking for. And this is more on the technical side than necessarily even the enjoying coffee side. Because at the end of the day, if you're liking the shot of coffee that you or shot of espresso that you pulled, great. Like if it's giving you what you need, great. But if you're really trying to get to the bottom and improve your palate and all that, it's going to take a little more effort. It's going to take a little more strategy. I remember the first time I saw you pull pomegranate. You mentioned it earlier, but it was literally pomegranate on a tasting note. And before that, I kind of thought that was I thought that was BS. Let me tell you something. Like some of these notes, and then I get a coffee and I see the notes. I know Catherine hasn't seen the notes. She goes, little pomegranate. And I'm like, okay. I don't know how she did that, but she did it. So we are, that's what I would say to that. Now, Catherine, with all of this answer to Keith, and Keith, thank you so much for the question. It's great. Really appreciate what you said about the podcast. Share it with your friends, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But with all of it we just said, I mean, did we even scratch the surface on this one? I'm not even going to pretend we got most of it. No. No, we didn't. And we don't want to, guys, we don't want you to think that we did. Like, there's a ton of other information out there. There's a ton of other people's experience. And here's your experience. And that's what we want to hear about. Like, so go into the comments on YouTube, go into the comments on in your podcast app of choice, and let us know your experiences, your tips and tricks on how to taste the coffee for all it's worth and not just let it roll over your tongue into your stomach and be forgotten. This is important stuff right here. But yeah, so definitely get in the comments and let us know about that stuff. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed making it, which you never do because we enjoy it way more. But we just really appreciate you guys for listening and watching and helping us to spread this wonderful hobby we found to everybody. Everybody that likes coffee should like roasting coffee. That's what I think. T-shirt idea. Anyway, we're excited to watch Roast Yourself podcast grow. We can't do that without you. And I also want to thank the entire team at Current Crop and Coffee Bean Corral, especially those that help us with our audio, video, look and sound good, and all that good stuff for the podcast. Really appreciate you all. Remember to send your questions, dear listeners, to questions at riypod.com. Questions about coffee roasting, coffee tasting, coffee enjoying, anything like that. Questions at riypod.com. Otherwise, have a great day and happy roasting.
Happy roasting.